Hi everyone. I wrote yesterday on Shades of Awakening that this weekend I'm going at the conference on new approaches to psychosis. I have been invited to show the results of my master thesis, and it looks like a couple of you were interested in knowing what I'm going to say this weekend. So I thought, why don't I make a video? No, sorry about the voice. So I thought, why don't I make a short presentation for you right now? So the first slide I chose for my presentation will be a quote from Gandhi. "You must be the change you want to see in the world." And I chose that quote because the change I would like to see in the world is less stigma and more interest in, inner reality of each individual without labeling. Because I think probably a lot of you would like to see that change in the world. So, during my presentation I'm going to show the results of my master thesis, but first I would like to explain, how did I even get to this point of doing this research? Because it took some time. Actually, I was at a different master thesis seminar. I was going to write about attachment style in children, and I've done 1 year of work. I had a subject, I've done research, already had the results, and after a year I just decided, that's not what I want to do. My heart is not in there. And I thought that it's so much easier to do the project right if, your heart is in there. So my second slide will be where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, because I find it so truthful. And, one day I just sat there and started thinking, where is my heart? And it became really clear that what truly interests me and where my heart is speaking about stigma and labels of mental illness, because I have experiences that myself in a big way. And doing research on that would, for me, make a lot of sense. I would feel like I can contribute something, contribute a new approach, a new outlook. And in the meantime, also I got involved with Shades of Awakening, and you taught me so many new perspectives, and I just had all these questions coming up, and I felt like there was so much material to turn that into research. So curiosity is the mother of all inventions, and I had, at this point I had a lot of curiosity. When I was 20, I was diagnosed with bipolar, and I was told I would never recover. And, I would have to take drugs till the rest of my life. And, only that message put me in a bigger depression that I actually declared, at the meeting with psychiatrist. And it put me in withdrawal for 1 year. I kept myself from other people, and I was deeply, deeply depressed. And after so many years, when I'm in a completely different place, I still ask myself that question: what was there in this diagnosis that was so extremely damaging, that had such a massive effect on my life? And it was only one word. That led me to the idea that the thesis I wanted to write was on the impact of our hidden beliefs about our diagnosis into different dimensions of well-being, like meaning of life, psychological flexibility, self-stigma, and self-compassion, because I felt like these dimensions of my well-being have been I have experienced the biggest loss on these dimensions. So I came up with this subject because I just thought that what was the most damaging in this message and this diagnosis was that it took away my own perspective, my own understanding of the states I was going through, and the natural curiosity of what was the source of them, and replaced it with this new outlook, the medical one. Sorry, my voice is really horrible today. So basically what it did, it like replaced all the questions I had, all the inner knowing, all attempts to understand what I'm going through and to link feelings with external situations, to make sense out of my suffering. And it replaced that with one word, which was bipolar. And from now on, I had only one explanation of all range of emotions and feelings I had. It was either I was going manic or I was going depressed, and that was all to it, basically. And as time passed, I started noticing the same tendency in my friends. I had a friend who was also diagnosed with manic depression. She has been hospitalized, and one day she called me, and she was feeling quite low. She wasn't well, and she said, "Anna, I think depression is coming. It's coming back again." And I listened to her, and I said, "Agnes, do you see any? Is there anything in your life right now that bothers you, that is unpleasant or stressful? Did you have any stressful events? Did something upset you?" And she said, no, it's completely random. Depression is coming, it's this time of the year, that's it. But as, our conversation moved on, and I asked her that again, are you sure there's nothing that upset you? She kind of stopped herself and she said, now when you asked me about that, I realized, I've been in love with this guy for 2 years, and I just found out that he's not in love with me. And I was quite sure that he reciprocated my feelings, So that was a little bit of a letdown, and yes, it probably upset me. And then I thought, if I had been in love with someone for 2 years, and I was waiting for us to get together and then find out that this person didn't love me, I would be quite upset, alright, So her feelings sounded to me like completely sane, completely reasonable, and adequate to the situation. And then she had this huge kind of, enlightenment, and she was so shocked that actually she was getting depressed because her feelings were, they were not shared. And, it really reminded me that when I got my diagnosis first, I was actually in a very similar place. I would stop seeing everything that was going on in my life, words of other people that hurt me, disappointment, dreams let down, all that stuff. I would completely discredit it and just say, I'm just ill, this is it. So for me, that was the most damaging factor in being diagnosed. And, when I found that out, I became really curious whether there's some general correlation going on. Do other people feel the same? Does it work like that for more people than only me? And so, I made this hypothesis that the more biomedical our approaches to our own diagnosis, the more we see ourselves as ill, and that we will always be ill and we have to take drugs and so on, the less well-being we will experience, So that was the idea, and when you're a researcher, you shouldn't really assume the results you're going to get. So, I had an open mind when I was doing this research, and I was open to accept that I was wrong, and this is not a general tendency, it's just something I have gone through, it's my own personal experience, and, it's not the same for other people. So I thought it would be extremely fascinating to do that research, and at this point I knew I was going to do this research fast because I had so much motivation. So, I quit my previous seminar. I went to the teacher. My legs were shaking because I felt, it was so ridiculous to quit all that work after 1 year. And I went to her and I sat down all red. Well, I actually don't get red, but I was very nervous. And she could tell, and I started like stammering, and she said, "You want to quit, Anna, don't you?" And I was quite surprised that she felt it, and I said, "Yes, actually I have a different idea for research. I'm really sorry." And she said, "You don't have to explain, it's fine." So by this point, the doors were open. I was so relieved, but at the same time I felt I was doing something completely insane because I wasted 1 year of my work and I only had a couple of months to complete my master thesis, from scratch, like from the scratch. And I didn't even know if I was going to find a new promoter, a new mentor. So I wrote to Dean, and I soon found out that actually we had a lot in common, and he was doing research in quite a similar field because he's very much involved in Association for Contextual Behavioral Science. And contextual psychology is an approach that says it really rejects the reductionist biomedical model of mental illness, and it says that if you want to understand a person, you have to understand the context. You have to see what's going on in their lives, because their pathological behavior is only a sign of a coping mechanism to deal with these situations. So, this approach is very close to my academic beliefs and my own experience. And, also ACT therapy is based on these principles of contextual psychology. ACT therapy is short for acceptance commitment therapy. It's like the third wave of cognitive behavioral therapy. And to make a story short, because I could talk a lot about CBT because I had my apprehension before, but at some point I became really interested in that, and I opened the first self-help group based on ACT principles in Warsaw, in my hometown, at my university. Because what really struck me and made me so in love with this therapy is that it says suffering is normal. Suffering is a part of life. We all suffer, all humans suffer, and the lack of suffering is unhuman. And that opened my eyes completely and gave me such a relief. So, all these kind of subjects in my life, like criticism of biomedical model and mental illness, ACBT and ACT kind of came together. And, I was happy to find out that my promoter was also interested in that field. So when I wrote to him, he accepted me straight away, and he was quite happy to have me and help me out. So, it was an important step. So yeah, as I said, I wanted to focus on 4 dimensions of well-being: meaning of life, self-stigma, self-compassion, and psychological flexibility. And self-compassion and psychological flexibility are the terms I took directly from ACT therapy. And I chose that partly because there were already created questionnaires for that, to check that. And also, when you're making a research for master thesis, you have to look for other research before you, to prove that your research has some, academic basis, that other research suggests that it's worth doing more research. So I found research they had very strange names. I don't know where they're from. Shamarosa, Unger, Mates, whatever. There was this research in 2016, so very recent. It was called An Online Intervention Using Information on the Mental Illness Continuum to Reduce Stigma. And it was published in European Psychiatry 2016 in February. So I read that research, and it seemed extremely relevant with my idea. What they did basically, they made an experiment. So this is good because if you're doing an experiment, you can talk about results in terms of cause and result, which I unfortunately cannot say about my research because I made correlation. Sorry, I have to plug my computer, it's dying. Yeah. So it's great that I found this research, and what they basically did was they split people into two groups, and one group of people was told that they had mental illness, they were diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar, all that kind of stuff. And, they were given the regular message, you have to take medication till the rest of your life. Unfortunately, there is no cure, and so on and so on. And to the other group, they gave that information on continuum of mental health. So instead of saying these are, ill people are here and healthy are there, they were saying we all suffer, we all have mental health issues, and we all move from, this point to this point. And they explained their situation, their suffering, and their distress in psychological terms, in terms of, talking about what happened in your life instead of what is wrong with you. And the results showed that the group of people who was getting message on the continuum of mental health did way better than the one that was given a dichotomic biomedical information. So, having read that, I was quite confident that my research made sense. I kind of felt it made sense before because it made sense in my life, but academically speaking, it kind of reassured me. Right, so I chose for the dimensions of well-being I was going to check in my subjects and people who were taking part in the research. And there were already created questionnaires for that, so that was an easy job. And then I had to create a scale that would check how mainstream, I called it dogmatic, people's ideas on their mental health was. So I created something I called the dogma scale. I created that by myself, and it consisted of 12 questions. I based that on just general kind of assumptions. Oh, someone's calling me. Well, never mind. So, I based that on like general idea of mental illness based on a biomedical model. Things like I believe my suffering is a lifelong medical condition. My suffering is mainly caused by biological abnormalities. There's no cure for my condition, and so on. So that was the scale I created, and I checked the reliability of this test. When you're creating your own questionnaire, you have to make sure that it's a good tool. So statistically speaking, it's okay not to go into details. It's good enough. So then I found all these other questionnaires for checking dimensions of well-being, for psychological flexibility, meaning in life, self-compassion scale, and internalized stigma and mental illness. I won't tell you the names because probably most of you are not interested. If you are, you can ask me afterwards. Okay, so then moving on to subjects, to lovely people who took part in my research. That's the part in the presentation where I'm going to show the logo of our lovely Shades of Awakening community. I talked to Dabney and she said it was okay if I put it in the right context. So I'm excited about that, that other people will hear about this lovely community and about, what we do. So I'm going to show the logo of Shades of Awakening as well as the Icarus project. The Icarus project is also a Facebook group, created for people with mental health crisis experience to share their experiences and their feelings with likewise people. So actually I started my journey with the Icarus project when I got diagnosed. I found them first. And I have some good experiences with them and some warm feelings. So when I was doing the research, I thought it would be great to post questionnaire into both of these groups, because Shades of Awakening and the Icarus project are a bit differently oriented. Like, they both concentrate on the subject of mental illness, but I feel like Shades are a little bit more spiritual, and the Icarus project is maybe a little bit more psychiatry oriented. Maybe I'm wrong. Like, I didn't write it for a long time, but I feel it's not, the emphasis on spirituality is not that evident. So the two groups have similarities and differences, and I thought the results would be more reliable if different sorts of people answer it. So the number of people who took part in my research was 100. That's what I was aiming for. It's not a huge group. It's not very small as well. It's kind of a good number for research, which makes the results reliable. So once again, I really wanted to thank you for taking part in my research. You were really amazing. I got 100 answers within a month, and that's really incredible. Usually it takes much, much longer. So thank you so much. It made my work really quicker. So thanks again. So moving on to results. It's a funny story because I got all your answers by Christmas, and during Christmas I was in Dublin with my boyfriend, and I'm a bit of a workaholic. I was there 2 weeks, and the first week of doing nothing was fine, but by the time it was second week, I was just already a little bit bored and I needed to do something. So I opened up my laptop and I went to statistical program, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to do it by myself. I'll have to read a lot about that, or I just have to send it to some statistic guys and they'll do it for me. But I was so curious. I was so just really couldn't wait to see the results. So that was a great motivation for me to actually, face the devil, face my biggest fear, and learn a little bit statistics so I can do the research by myself. And it was incredible because it turned out that it's not that horrible, it's not that difficult, and I managed to do it all by myself, which gives me some satisfaction. And when I saw results, I couldn't, believe my eyes. Usually, when you have some hypothesis, what you get is results you were not wishing to get. That's kind of a normal for research, and that's what I was expecting. That I had some idea, right, and it's great, but results are going to be, something completely different. But actually, the research showed exactly what I was expecting and what I felt in my heart to be right. It really kind of confirmed what I instinctively felt, that basically speaking, seeing our own suffering in medical terms within a biomedical model lowers our well-being on very many dimensions. So I made 5 correlations. The first one was correlation between dogmatic beliefs on our own diagnosis and self-stigma. So I wanted to check whether the more mainstream and dogmatic our approach is towards our own diagnosis makes our self-stigma bigger and increases it. And the results show that it does big way, that there is a very strong correlation between dogma and self-stigma, and the higher mainstream views are, the higher self-stigma is. So that is something to really think about. It's really interesting, that the more we trust this message that, we are mentally ill and we always will when we have to take these pills, the more we stigmatize ourselves, the more we withdraw. Also, because I checked this correlation on also some more detailed dimensions within self-stigma, and it showed that the strongest impact dogmatic beliefs have are on social withdrawal. So the more mainstream we are in seeing ourselves, the more we withdraw from other people and from society. And that's exactly what happened to me these 5 years ago. I just got the diagnosis and I cut myself off from people completely. I didn't want to see friends, I didn't want to go out. So it really kind of, made me feel like crying when I saw that, because it's just exactly what happened to me, There you go. So another correlation I've made was between self-stigma and meaning of life. So my question was, if we stigmatize ourselves more, does it mean that we experience less meaning in our lives? And the correlation was also valid. It wasn't as strong as the first one, but it was medium. And it was a minus correlation, meaning that the more we stigmatize ourselves, the lower our meaning in life is. And I think that makes sense intuitively, Moving on to the next, I wanted to check whether mainstream views on mental illness correlated with meaning of life. So wanted to see whether, if my views on myself are mainstream, I'm ill, and so on, will my meaning of life be lower? And the correlation was valid as well, also medium. So the more mainstream we think about ourselves, the lower our meaning in life is. And next correlation was mainstream views versus experience avoidance. Experience avoidance is a term created by ACT therapy. Experience avoidance is like the opposite of psychological flexibility. So basically speaking, people who are flexible psychologically allow themselves to feel certain feelings, to experience things. And the opposite of that is experience avoidance, meaning pushing away these experiences. And the correlation turned out to be very strong and positive, meaning that the more mainstream we think about ourselves, the more we avoid experience. And this is extremely interesting, isn't it? I think it would be good to do some more research on that, how does it exactly happen? But I know from myself and from my own life that it was the case for me. When I believed I was bipolar, I was never going to recover. I was afraid of my own feelings because they have been pathologized. I was told that if I was getting happy, I had to be careful because that was dangerous, because I was going to go manic. If I was sad, I was, scared to cry, because then I thought I would just like slip into some huge dark hole and never go back to myself, So I had to repress all these feelings and all experiences, and this is scary because, what is there to life more than emotions and feelings and experiencing things? So if you deprive yourself from that, what is there left in life? And that makes sense why my research showed that it also makes your meaning in life lower, And the last correlation I've made was dogma versus self-compassion. Self-compassion is also a term widely used in ACT therapy. So self-compassion is ability, to calm yourself, to speak to yourself kindly in stressful situations, which is extremely useful. It's like the biggest tool you can have in dealing with difficult states of mind and difficult feelings. And my research showed that the more mainstream you are, the lower your self-compassion is as well. So, it's really important because, if we're giving someone diagnosis, we should be doing it, to actually help them, to give them tools, to equip them to deal with their own life. And it looks like it's not the case, like it's not exactly happening. Because what happens, people's ability to have self-compassion, to accept themselves, drops. So to sum everything up, all my scientific mumbo-jumbo, to put it short, the more dichotomic biomedical way of giving other people information on their mental health is, the worse their functioning, their well-being drops, and it's not helpful, and we need to change the way we treat people and we inform people about their conditions. So I hope you found that interesting, and cross your fingers for this weekend. I hope it goes well.